Good morning, I'm Carl. Welcome to Coffee with the Garden Club. This is part 2 of 2 episodes that I am dedicating to sea kale, which is one of my favorite perennial foods. During episode 1 of this series, I talked about how sea kale tastes and sort of general growing tips for sea kale. The different types of foods that you could get from it, the different types of harvests, and why I really love sea kale. This episode is dedicated to starting sea kale seeds and saving sea kale seeds. And I wanted to dedicate one entire episode to that because it's kind of a complex process. So I felt like if I tried to say everything I knew about sea kale in one episode, it would just be really long. So this is about how to start sea kale from seed. If you want to know more about sea kale as a plant and why I really love it, go check out yesterday's episode. The sea kale plant will put out bundles of white flowers. They kind of smell like chocolate, amazingly enough. And they are really pretty, great for pollinators. And if you let those go to seed, you'll get these little round green seed pods, which you have to let dry on the plant. You don't want to harvest these, at least I never harvest them until the stalks have dried out. At that point, I will clip off the stalks, and they're a lot like lightweight branches, and I can hang them upside down in my garage. And I will leave them until the winter time when I have time to come back and take these down, pull off all the little seed pods and collect them. And I often will save about a quart of these seed pods, which ends up being fewer seeds than you would imagine, but plenty for my seed sharing purposes. So you need to, if you want to plant sea kale, you can't just plant the seed pods themselves, which are like about yay big. You actually have to take out the little seed from inside of that pod. So I'm going to show you how to do that here. What you want to do is you take the seed pod and snip it. I use kitchen shears for this. I just snip a little bit on one, sometimes two sides of this seed casing. The seed casing is called a pericarp, by the way. And that usually snaps the seed casing in half, revealing a little dark brown seed inside. The seed casing is, as you'll see once you open it up, it's like almost foam surrounding the seed. And this is used because the sea kale plant, as you might imagine from the name, grows along the seashore. And it grows usually in Europe along the seashore. These little seed pods are able to float, and they can float to a different beach once they fall off and float. But if you try to grow the seeds without removing this pericarp, it will take years for the seeds to germinate, and they may not germinate at all. So that's why you need to remove it, just like I've just shown you. Now, once you have this seed removed from the pericarp, you want to start them indoors. You can start them just in ordinary seed starting mixture, but I would recommend that you start them in paper pots. I use toilet paper rolls that I cut in half and then stuff full of seed starting mix. You don't want to cram it too tightly because it needs to be fluffy enough for the young roots. But if you pack the bottom kind of tightly, they will stay intact as one small half tube of soil. You take these and you put your little seed in there just a little bit below the surface. It doesn't have to be very deep. And you then water them from the bottom, put them in a tray and water them from the bottom. and you wait, because these take quite a while to germinate, a couple of weeks anyway, and sometimes they never do germinate. So you want to start more than you need. I feel like my germination rate is usually somewhere in the range of about 20% or so. I'm doing a germination test right now, and after 10 days, I have only a 5% germination rate. I'm expecting a few more of the seeds will germinate over the next week or so. But after 10 days, you might have one little seedling. I would say after 20 days, you'll have probably 20%. You might get a better germination rate than that if you're really good at what you do. But I haven't had terrific germination rates. So plant more than you need. And now, one way that I've heard you can improve your germination rate is by soaking for 24 hours in a saline solution about the salinity of sea salt. I don't know if this is true. I might just try that this year just as an experiment, although I don't really need more sea kale plants at this point. But it could work. You might want to give that a try for, say, half of your seeds. If you've got 20 seeds, try soaking 10 of them in a seawater solution for 24 hours and then planting. You don't want to water the plant with seawater. Even though it's called sea kale and it grows near the seashore, you don't want to water it with salt water. Water it with fresh water. And when you transplant it, I would suggest transplanting it at least once before you go out into the garden, because your little seedlings, the ones that survive, you've hopefully planted them in a paper pot. You can take that paper pot once you see the roots starting to crawl out the bottom, and transplant that into a larger, preferably a larger paper pot if possible. I suggest this because when you put them in the garden, you really want to disturb these roots as little as possible. So then you want to perhaps move this out into the garden sometime in early summer. But when you do, you want to make sure that it's tall enough to survive. A couple of inches is at least the minimum. And then you need to protect it, because it is a favorite of foragers at this young stage. Once it gets bigger, I haven't had much problem with it. I don't know if people have problems with deer as these get larger. So you need to protect it for, I would say, the greater part of the first year. I also find that it's very easy to stumble over certain small plants, and if you knock this one over, it's not going to come back in the first year. After the first year, you're never going to have to worry about this plant. It will come back almost no matter what. But during the first year, definitely take good care of it. I put a tomato cage around it to keep me from stepping on it and to keep dogs or whatever from running across it. And I don't have deer, so I don't have to worry about that. And the squirrels don't seem to like sea kale, so I'm good there. Once you've protected this for your first season, the second season it should come back really well. The ones that I start from seed, year 2, they're not full-size plants, which is not true of the ones that I start from sea kale root segments, which I talk about in the previous video. So you could probably start harvesting a little bit in year 2, but they will not reach their full size. And their full size is somewhere around 4 feet in diameter. These are very big plants. So plan for a large plant when you put one in the ground. That third year with a plant started from seed will be very productive. You will also be able to harvest broccolis and seed pods if you want from this plant. Once again, I go into that in the previous video, but it's definitely worth mentioning. But this is a bit of a long-term project. Once you have it started, you will find that it can be propagated indefinitely. You can take root segments from the plant and plant a new plant with every 4 to 6 inch segment that you take off of the roots. don't want to harvest those too aggressively, but you can, in year 3, you could probably take a few of those and start, 3 or 4 more plants from that initial plant that you had. And, time in going forward, you can keep doing that. Now, I have propagated from root a little too much. The reason I say that is that I have very little genetic diversity in my sea kale plants, and so they don't produce a whole lot of seeds. I am this year going to diversify that. I've purchased new root segments from a company called Cultivariable, and those are, I purchased a range of them, so it's kind of a wide, diverse genetics for about 6 plants, and I will intersperse the ones that I have. At the end, during the season, I will intersperse those, and at the end of the season, I will probably pull out at least half of the plants that I have and share the root segments with other folks. So definitely stay tuned if you're interested in getting your hands on some sea kale root segments. Also, I'm happy to share sea kale seeds. So I have some of these, and while I have them, you're welcome to them. Just let me know, and I will try and get some into the mail for you. I hope you have enjoyed these 2 segments on sea kale, why I love it, and how to propagate it. I hope you will give me a thumbs up down below. I hope you leave comments and questions for me, and I hope you will take a look also at my Instagram feed at Food Forest Garden Club and at our website, which is under development, foodforestgardenclub.org. I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy your coffee.